The mysterious case of Mica Miller has set the internet ablaze over the last several weeks. And more recently, some disturbing details have been exposed all about her preacher husband, JP Miller. Today, we're going to review everything we know so far and explore some of the theories that are circulating around the internet. So sit back, relax, and take a deep breath. It's time to let the fresh air in. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new. I hope you are having a great day and a great week so far. My name is Erin, and I am fascinated by all things cult, true crime, and really just human behavior in general. So if you're into this too, please consider subscribing. I would love to have you here. I cover a true crime story and a cult every single week. Now, before we jump in, I want to let you know that this video is for entertainment purposes only. I'm sharing my opinions and speculations based off of the publicly available information that I have found. So please don't take anything in this video as fact. I am drawing my own conclusions here. This is an ongoing investigation, so always remember to do your own research. New information is also coming out every single day, so I will probably be providing an update when we know more. I'd also like to offer a trigger warning about stalking, unaliving, emotional manipulation, and behavior. If you need to sit this one out, I completely understand. So without further ado, let's jump right in. Tragically, on Saturday, April 27th, 2024, Mica Miller called 911. She asked that the dispatcher track her location because she was about to unalive herself, and she wanted her family to know where to go and find her body. She was in Lumber River State Park, nearly an hour and a half north of where she lived. Later that afternoon, a fisherman would find her body in the river. Her husband, Pastor J.P. Miller, would be notified of her death that evening, and the next day would preach a sermon at church just like he had every Sunday for years before. There wasn't a big difference in tone or even approach in this sermon. He was making jokes like he always did. But at the end of the sermon, something was different. He asked his congregation to stand because he had news to share with them, and he let them know that the previous day his wife had ended her own life, and he discussed some of her mental health challenges. Now, a lot of people, myself included, thought that this was just weird and problematic. Not only is this guy airing out his wife's mental health challenges publicly, he's also strangely chipper, joking about what a tall drink of water he considered himself to be. And a cause of death hadn't even been officially ruled until about a week later. So, needless to say, Micah's family was enraged when they heard about what he was saying at this sermon and immediately began speaking out about JP and his alleged mistreatment of Micah. So, let's take a look at everything we know. Mica Miller was 30 years old and completely devoted to her faith. She was passionate about women and supporting them, and very energetic about making other people's lives better. When you watch her videos online, you can just see she has a light inside of her, a brightness and a passion that just permeates through the screen. She seems intentional, passionate, and honest, and at times, even a little troubled. She wanted her audience, her community, to relate to her. She wanted to be honest about her experience. But only her closest friends and relatives knew exactly how and why she was troubled. She only opened up to a few people about the toxic relationship she had with her husband, Pastor J.P. Miller. The two met when she was 10 years old because she attended the church, and JP would ask her to babysit the several children he had with his wife at the time named Allison. He also gave her a job as a secretary at slash for the church. JP just wanted Micah to be around him. Even though she's literally considered to be a child, he was very taken in by her. And even though she was incredibly young, I mean, he's literally 14 years older than her and he's still a child. This is not uncommon when it comes to JP. He does have a history of getting involved with underage children, specifically children of parents who attend the church. In fact, women who experienced his predatory behavior have been speaking out against him. Here's one woman's story. Cherish Avery spoke out about her experience with JP. While posting updates, I'm going to speak out on the Mica Miller case. I am an ex of John Paul Miller. I was 14 years old and he was 19. I was a child, but at the time I didn't see an issue. But at 19, obviously, he should have. We dated for a year and I found out he was dating his wife, Allie, while we were together, unbeknownst to her. She later found out, and he lied about it as he continued to do the multitude of infidelities the remainder of their relationship. This has been hard to watch and keep quiet about, but I feel it's time to be transparent about it. I attended and graduated from Grand Strand Academy, later renamed Cathedral Hall Academy, the church and school his father founded and was headmaster of, which later became Solid Rock. I dated John Paul and dealt with a small amount of his comparatively. JP also contacted me inappropriately after Allie finally left him due to infidelity around 2016. This is while he's also seeing Mica. He was not remorseful of his actions to her with others, was upset over the amount of people who left the church that hurt him financially, and was quickly shut down on my end. What I did witness with myself and my siblings as members in the church as teenagers is the overall from JP and his father, Dr. Reginald Wayne Miller, to others. I also visited many state parks with JP, visiting his dad because he loved state parks to reconnect with God. Myrtle Beach State Park is also where Dr. Miller was arrested for soliciting gay. You can look that up publicly. The fact that Micah was found in a state park only brings me back to this family. I feel I have been a coward in not speaking up and dealing with this privately with my family, but I want to say we believe this was Micah's last and oh so important purpose is stop this man from continuing to hurt others and stop him as a representation of our Lord and Savior. I am a Christian and I love the Lord so much. And I want to say that what John Paul Miller and Dr. Reginald Wayne Miller represent is not of God. It is not a representation of Jesus Christ. God is good and pure and kind, and he would never want a man to treat his wife the way JP treated Micah. Please don't let this evil man turn you away from the church. The church of God is so beautiful and good, and this man is an evil representation of someone that took advantage of that. Don't let the devil win. Hashtag justice for Micah. And it breaks my heart to hear that she feels like a coward because at the same time, she's young, she's processing. He's a leader of her church. What a difficult predicament situation that he's put her in. And he knows he does it. This is why, in my opinion, he targets the young people within his church because he, as disgusting as it still would be, he could target young people who are not within the church, but they would be more likely to speak out about some strange man they don't know. Him targeting young children within the church is going to help him stay kind of hidden in plain sight because they're going to be too afraid to speak up. They're going to think that since he's the pastor, what he's doing is good and godly. And it's just heartbreaking to see and hear of so many survivors of his. It's just disturbing. It's like he has absolutely no boundaries, especially considering he's not just married, but he's a pastor trying to uphold these laws in the Bible. It just doesn't make any sense to me. Or maybe it makes a lot of sense because this is not the first time we have seen a person who is in a religious or spiritual position of power take advantage of his congregates. And not only do we have testimonials from his survivors, and yes, I'm going to call them survivors because a child cannot truly consent to certain acts like this, especially with this power dynamic at play, with him being the pastor of the church. I definitely consider these victims survivors. I mean, JP himself thought he was just untouchable. So eventually, Micah would go on to marry a man named Jeremy, who just so happened to be JP's best friend. JP would even go so far as to officiate their wedding and described Jeremy as being his right hand man. And it's just starting to give really big cult vibes. Like, he just wanted Micah in his field of vision constantly. He needed to see her at work at the church, he needed to see her at home with the children. He wanted to know who she was with intimately, and it had to be someone he knew so he could potentially and allegedly talk to his best friend about Micah. It almost feels like it was an arranged marriage to me. I mean, she was only 18 when she got married. And I am not saying that it was an arranged marriage, but when you're married and you meet this young girl and she marries your best friend the second she turns 18, and you just somehow are there for every milestone, it just seems very, very odd to me. Like, where's the boundary between this is a pastor, a person that speaks for God and shares wisdom with you once a week, versus someone who is older than you, completely infiltrating your life while you're a minor? It just feels super predatory. It's like when he finds someone he's interested in, he feels completely entitled to them, their time, their energy, their work. And obviously, having met Micah when she was 15 raised alarm bells for many. But some JP apologists and his family say, well, she was an adult by the time they got together, so it shouldn't really be a big deal. But it was a big deal, especially considering their romantic and physical relationship began while they were both still married to their spouses. And they did it right under their spouses' noses, too. They were always working on music for the church together, so they were alone a lot. But they always had the excuse that, oh, it was just all for the church. But that would all change one day. Allison, JP's wife, would actually catch them in the act of engaging in a certain physical act together. And I can't imagine the betrayal and confusion you would feel walking into something like that. I mean, the man you have had several children with, who's the pastor at your church, who you've built a life with, is sleeping with your babysitter? With a girl who is barely 21 years old and is married to his best friend? It would just be such a mind meld wrapping your brain around all of this information. Plus, Allison would have to expose this to the higher ups at the church because it might be no surprise to you, but this was not the first time JP had been involved with teenage girls, and teenage girls who were a part of his very congregation, no less. He had done this multiple times while married, and it wouldn't surprise me if we heard from even more survivors as time goes on because it just feels like men like him do not change. And the church was seemingly protecting him, and still is, in my opinion. I mean, he wasn't even fired from the church. He's currently on paid leave. Like, give me a break. And JP would admit to this disgusting behavior to church officials because an adultery divorce would ruin his career. So he had to be upfront with everyone. He admitted not just to affair, but to having relations with multiple teenage girls who attended the church. The church leaders demanded that he get counseling for his behavior, but he refused. So they were like, okay, never mind. You can still keep your job and preach every Sunday. What? Are you are you kidding me? Does the church have any principles? Are we just going to brush everything under the rug? But luckily, majority of the congregation found out about all of this and left. But honestly, I cannot believe the leaders of the church would just turn a blind eye to a literal predator who is putting their congregation's children at risk. They're enabling a predator in a place where parents should feel confident that their children will be safe. I mean, this is just abhorrent and disgusting behavior from all of them. Like, I don't care what you believe, but if you're willing to keep a predator as a leader of your organization or your religion, don't kid yourself and call yourself a man of God or a church or that you're serving some higher power. You're disgusting and should be utterly ashamed of yourself. The church should have done a full scale investigation and reported JP to the police. Behavior like this that goes unchecked just continues. And obviously, JP continued, and he is completely, even to this day, it seems, incapable of taking any responsibility or accountability. So Allison would go on to file for divorce from JP, but not after experiencing hell on earth at this pastor's hands. See, even though JP had committed a literal unforgivable sin, even in the eyes of God and the church, he still had to control Allison. He wasn't going to let her make decisions for herself. He wasn't going to let her escape his control. He is a man. He is the pastor. And the pastor can't get a divorce. But Allison wanted a divorce. She wanted to get away from this dangerous man. And she alleges that he stalked her and harassed her. He would show up to her job, show up to her new church because obviously she wasn't going to go sit and watch him at the pulpit every Sunday. I mean, he turned her life upside down, so she had to start a new one. But he found her. He would show up at her new job, her church, and he even moved into a house across from her so he could watch her while she's trying to start her new life, be in her own home, feel safe, get away from the abuse, which I don't understand people like this who cheat on their partner finds out, wants to leave them, then they obsess even more over their partner. Like, what did you expect to happen? Like, you're cheating on this person. That would tell me you don't want to be with them anymore. Is it just control? Is it just obsession? Is it just wanting to have your cake and eat it too? Like, did you just expect her to stick around and stay with you? Oh, okay, babe. Yeah, you're into underage girls. Totally fine. I'm just going to raise our children with a predator in my house. I don't think so. You're sleeping with other young girls while pretending to be a man of God. You are literally using your church as a place to target minors. It's disgusting behavior. He literally decided to stalk Allison. And this is all going on while he is continuing to see Micah. That's what blows my mind with all of this. Because Micah also filed for divorce from Jeremy at the same time. So you can't be up on a pulpit teaching God's word while also being an adulterer who is harassing the woman that you're cheating with while also being a predator. Like, you have to pick one. You're either a man of God or a disgusting, sinful, gross excuse of a man. And I'm sorry to get heated and impassioned, but this is just such a frustrating situation for netizens like me, for the family of Micah, for all of the young girls that felt like they couldn't report this because he's a leader of their church, for all the congregates who have spent money, who have offered tithings to the church to find out that the pastor is targeting their children. It is such a gross misuse of power that it just makes me feel incensed. Anyways, let's jump back to the story. Sorry to run off on a tangent, but I hope that some of you are sharing the same feelings as me. I know I'm not alone here. So, anyways, his divorce with Allison was messy, with arguments over money and alimony that lasted a while. And of course, he was trying to get out of paying for alimony and child support. But on the outside, you wouldn't really know any of this. He and Micah were the new it couple, and they would end up getting married in 2017 when she was 22 and he was 36. Now, sources differ on exactly when Micah was diagnosed, But her mental health does play a large role in this case, especially considering that her cause of death has now legally been deemed an unaliving. Her family believes, however, that she was pushed over the edge because of JP and his harassment, mistreatment, and now, JP likes to push the narrative that it was all Micah, that all of the challenges they were finding in their marriage was Micah because she had her own demons to face, and he was just there trying to help her. But the more we learn about him and hear and see the evidence of how he treated her, I, for one, can't help but believe Micah's family. Micah had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder. Now, this is a disorder that is described as someone having intense mood swings from manic episodes of high energy and sometimes a loss of touch with reality, and then swinging to the other side of the pendulum and experiencing depressive episodes and deep sadness that can result in unaliving ideation or even taking action on that. Now, I do want to say I am not a therapist. I only know the bit of research I've done on bipolar. I don't know all of the nuances, and I'm trying to be more aware of that as I discuss cases like this and different cult leaders and dynamics. So, in researching this case, I watched a video analysis by Dr. Todd Grande, and he said that people with bipolar disorder might be excitement seeking, searching for those emotional highs. He also said that they're more likely to be harmed in relationships because they can lack boundaries and have a tendency to have toxic relationships. From what I've gathered from Dr. Grande's analysis, is that if a person has bipolar disorder and their partner is doing things like what JP was allegedly doing to Micah, like stalking, tracking, etc., it can only exacerbate the feelings of paranoia within her, or even worse. So then or in this case, JP, gaslights the person who would be Micah into believing it's their bipolar disorder, not something that's really happening. So Micah might have been more willing to believe what he was telling her, especially if part of bipolar is having manic episodes where she feels a little unattached from reality. It's a really toxic and sad cycle to be in, and it feels like JP again took advantage of that. From what we've seen from JP in this aftermath, it seems like he's still running with this narrative that Micah needed help, was off her medication, and was just being erratic. But to dive a little bit deeper, I want to share a timeline of their relationship leading up to Micah's death, because after hearing Allison's story, it's probably going to sound very familiar. Now, before I jump into this, I do want to talk about the dynamic at play here, because yes, Micah did have an affair with JP. And you know what they say, you lose them how you get them. But based off the fact that she was a minor when they met, and that he has a history of grooming minors, and there's a power dynamic at play here, considering he's a leader at the church, it's my belief that Micah was absolutely groomed by JP. It doesn't really matter to me that she was over 18 by the time they got together. It was still deeply inappropriate. That's literally what grooming means. It's what groomers do. They start when someone is young and then they wait until they're of legal age to swoop in and take advantage. He essentially watched her grow up. He had status and power. He was the church speaker for God. She trusted him. He had an influence over her. He was able to persuade her. He is described by other people as charismatic with an ability to get people to do whatever he wanted them to do. And we hear this about every cult leader this channel has covered. He has been described as a false prophet, making rules for others, but him being allowed to break those rules. So before we jump into the timeline and anyone says, well, she had an affair, she was still basically a child, young, impressionable, and she had been targeted by him. He is a predator, and it is my belief that he would never have stopped stalking his prey. In October of 2023, Micah filed for divorce from JP, citing, you guessed it, adultery. Not just with one woman, but allegedly with several women. This action would spark a series of terrible behaviors and from JP, ones that friends and family of Micah's have now been speaking out about. She finally confided in them. They shared that they had known that the marriage had been rocky for at least 2 years, but didn't truly know how bad things had gotten until fall of 2023. JP apparently confessed to the church board in an apology letter. He confessed that he and Micah had decided to separate and that he had been texting the daughter of two members of the church. History is just repeating itself, and once again, the church board is like, it's cool, bro. Get up on that pulpit and talk about God. Apparently, during their separation, they had agreed to see other people, again, according to JP. And of course, this means that he can just go on texting minors. But once again, the congregation started to see some red flags because, like we've said, history likes to repeat itself. And after a few weeks of questionable messaging from his sermons, many friends of Micah's decided they were going to leave the church. So, since they left, she finally felt safe confiding in them when she realized they were no longer under JP's spell. She confided in them that he was addicted to sex and would sometimes force her to do it 3 to 5 times a day. If she refused or wasn't in the mood, he would literally torture her. He'd keep her up at night by blasting loud music in her ears or even dump water on her right as she was drifting off to sleep. I mean, he sounds like an absolute monster. And what makes me even more mad after hearing this is that he just kept blaming her mental health. She didn't take her meds. She was erratic. She was struggling with bipolar. She should have just prayed more. But you're literally her almost daily, emotionally, physically, sexually. You are abused. So, this is going to exacerbate any symptom that she has from bipolar disorder. This is enough to make anyone who doesn't have a mental health disorder act erratically because you are depriving her of her basic human needs. These are all torture tactics. You aren't letting her sleep. You are forcing intercourse on her. You are pumping her full of testosterone to try to increase her libido. Of course, she's going to go manic. You're depriving her of the things that she needs to be mentally healthy, then blaming her behavior on not taking enough lithium, which can literally destroy your mind and your behaviors, especially if you're taking too much. It just, as you can probably tell, it literally makes me see red. He also forced her into what has been described as dehumanizing acts that involved other men, toys, and sometimes even animals. It's making me so sick. I just want this man locked up because he just is disgusting to me. I know there's no physical proof right now that he had anything to do with her death, but the fact that he's done all of this to me, I mean, the behavior just is bound to escalate, in my opinion. Then, on top of all this, he's having multiple affairs. How depraved do you have to be? And the thing that's so heartbreaking about this, or I guess makes it even more heartbreaking, I should say, is she was devout in her faith. She would do anything to protect her faith. She was a woman of God. She'd been brought up in this church. And since he's the pastor of her church, protecting her faith meant she had to protect him. He had all the power in the relationship. They were both well known in the community. And it's already challenging enough for someone to leave in a situation, but to have to do it in front of your congregation and to convince them all that the man they go to for spiritual guidance is actually an abuser, it would make the task of speaking out even more daunting and horrifying. So she had to silently collect evidence, and she would spend the next 4 months doing just that. In February of this year, JP had her involuntarily admitted into the Waccamaw Center for Mental Health, allegedly to find that evidence that she had collected on her phone, computer, and dispose of it. When she left the facility, her car was missing, along with her purse and her identification. She tried to file a police report, but when they questioned JP, He would claim that she was having a mental health episode and he took all her belongings because she always spent money when she had one of these episodes, according to him. Since they were technically still married, no criminal charges could be filed against JP because the car was technically both of theirs. That same month, Mica withdrew her divorce filings, and I can only assume it was out of fear. However, they were still estranged. She moved in with a friend, and her father got her a new car, so she wasn't as tied to JP. I mean, she was trying to escape. She was doing everything survivors are told to do. Silently collect your evidence, have a game plan on how you're going to escape, get a paper trail by filing police reports, and start telling people that you trust. Go to people that you trust. Get a support group around you. Get out of that situation. But it just wasn't enough for Mica because JP was relentless. He went out of his way to scare her. In March, he slashed one of her tires and put a tracking device on her car. When she went to get the tire fixed, he followed her there and they had a public confrontation. She filed a police report and even wanted to get a no contact order against him. She was becoming more and more fearful of him in the months leading to the end of her life. And in my opinion, I think JP knew that he could push her over the edge. Even Dr. Grande said in his video analysis, doing things like slashing someone's tires and putting a tracking device on someone's car who already has paranoid thoughts is only going to make that person more paranoid and fearful. It's only going to worsen the symptoms of their mental health disorder. I believe that JP liked knowing that. Maybe he didn't intend to have her end her own life, but maybe he thought he could get her to reach such an extreme or erratic behavior that she would be the one publicly shamed instead of him. And so, as they're going through their divorce filings, he would be able to get all the things that he wanted because he would be basically taking advantage and exacerbating her mental health condition. Because if everything she knew about him went public, it would literally destroy him and his reputation. She was determined to be an example for other women. She started sharing advice for women of faith who might be in a scary relationship, who feel trapped. She was encouraging people to leave their dangerous situations despite what the church or the Bible said.
So today my heart's a little heavy. I've had a lot of women that have reached out to me about situations of abuse. And I just want to tell you what a lot of people have told me lately and reminded me because I think I forgot. I knew, but I pushed it in the back of my head just because of my situation. But you are the bride of Christ. Before anybody else's bride, male or female, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what gender you are. Abuse is abuse. And you are the bride of Christ. And my Bible says that he took all the abuse you could think of for you so that you didn't have to live that life of slavery and bondage and pain. Jesus took it all for you. So you don't have to stay in a abusive relationship, whether that's sexual, whether that's somebody forcing you to take illegal drugs or alcohol abuse or physical abuse, psychological abuse, making you think that this is all your fault, or you're a bad mom, or you're a bad wife, or you're a bad husband, or you're not giving it your all when you know you are. God hates divorce, but why? According to everybody I've asked and the scriptures that I've found, it's because it hurts people. But does abuse hurt people? How do you think God feels about that? So I want to remind you, like a bunch of people have been reminding me lately, that I'm God's bride first. And even an earthly spouse who's a good spouse, when they know that their bride is being hurt. Just imagine what an earthly spouse does. What do you think your heavenly spouse does when you're the bride of Christ and he sees his bride going through abuse and hurt? What do you think he thinks about that? So, encouragement in all this is you are the bride of Christ first before anybody else's. And he's got you. And he sees you. And he loves you.
And now, in hindsight, we understand how intentional and honest she was being. It's so clear that she was trying to share her story without airing out any dirty laundry. She really wanted to spread a message and be a beacon of hope for other women in similar situations. In April, after a public confrontation, JP anonymously posted a topless photo of his wife online. We know it was him because later he wrote an apology email to Mica admitting that it was him and that he was evil. But, he took it down just an hour later, so it was barely up. It's not that big of a deal. Well, it was up long enough for Mica to try to once again file a police report that they wouldn't let her file because the nudes were blurred, so technically it wasn't a nude photo. Just ridiculous. And also, apparently, in some states, if you send a photo like that to someone, they apparently become the owner of it and then they can do whatever they want with it. It doesn't sound right to me. I mean, it still sounds like revenge, but still, just as a word of caution, be careful who you send pictures to because even a man of God will be quick to post them if you make him mad enough. On April 25th, JP was once again officially served with divorce papers. Mica was ready to move on. According to her friends, Mica was looking forward to her new life. She was making plans. She was taking charge of her life. So when it came to an abrupt end on April 27th, just 2 days later, all her friends and family were shocked and devastated, to say the least. How did JP react? Well, he went to church the next day, as usual, stood at the pulpit, made his jokes, before suddenly announcing his wife's unaliving right then and there. Now, yes, of course, everyone grieves differently. For some people, it helps to jump right back into work. I know for me, good luck peeling me off the floor if this ever happened to someone I love. And JP's been receiving a lot of criticism for this sermon, and rightly so, in my opinion. Why is he making these crass jokes about how attractive he is? And why is he so casually sharing his wife's personal struggles? He's so quick to push his own agenda, his own narrative, and just conveniently leave out how toxic he was in the relationship. He would text Micah's family after her death, bluntly saying, "I thought you two should know. Micah unalived herself earlier today. She needed her lithium because she's been having a 3-month psychotic episode. I'll keep you posted on funeral." What? You notify her family via text? This is horrific. Then, in a larger group text to more members of the family, he wrote, "This is what happens when you try to encourage someone to divorce the person they love and tell them they don't need medicine and that they're not ill when they are. Good job, Francis family." Why do you need to do that? Why do you need to do that? And furthermore, it's been alleged that her doctor gave her the okay to wean off of some of her lithium. Lithium is an intense that can really alter your behavior and how you operate. Many people who have gotten on lithium want to get off of it or take less of it. It's also helped many people. But it sounds like to me, JP, that you wanted her heavily medicated so that you could control her more, so that she had less autonomy. She had less control over her body, her mind, her reactions, because it sounds like you're a guy that wants control. And luckily, her family has stuck up for her, saying, "F out of here. You are the reason our sister is dead." Another family member says, "It's easy to shift the blame when that's all you know how to do. No one told her not to take her medicine. Get that through your thick skull. You drove her crazy, simple as that. And the surgery that you wanted set her off on this path." How dare you even contact us talking like that? So, to say that things are contentious between the two families is an understatement. JP held a memorial service for Micah, and some sources say that her family wasn't invited, others say they refused to go and held their own funeral. But he did the eulogy, and it was strange to say the least. Suddenly, we see JP acting like a grieving husband after so nonchalantly sharing the news of his wife's passing just weeks prior. He's crying, but doesn't shed a single tear. And he's sharing these personal anecdotes and stories that keep seeming like these little digs at Micah's expense. The man isn't even wearing black to the memorial and is making this all about himself while pretending to cry on stage. Where was all this compassion when you were forcing your wife awake to sleep with her by dumping water all over her? Hmm? Where was all this pain and concern when you were trying to pump your wife full of testosterone so she could sleep with you? Or when you slashed her tires because she was trying to leave you? Where was all of this compassion and love when you were posting revenge? What a sorry excuse of a man of God. So, has JP just dug himself a hole and staying low key and under the radar? Well, the answer to that question is unsurprisingly no. Just 4 days after his wife unalives herself, he was seen out on a date drinking and laughing with a woman who attends the church. It just feels so disgusting to me. You're out drinking and laughing with some woman, and then you perform this grief stricken eulogy days later, a week later. It just does not compute. This case is such a frustrating one, and I know Micah's loved ones are still fighting for justice for Micah. They believe JP was responsible for her death, perhaps not directly pulling the trigger, but causing so much mental strain and harassment and abuse that it drove her to make that decision. Her death has still been ruled an unaliving, and the evidence we have points to her driving up north, getting a gun along the way, and calling 911 to tell the dispatcher where her family can find her body. JP's car was seen an hour away from where her body was found. So technically, I guess he has an alibi, even though some say it's not a very strong one. The hard evidence does look like it was an unaliving. But of course, there are speculations and they are running wild. Some say that her voice on the 911 call was AI generated, that you can hear a man's voice in the background, or that perhaps she was forced to pull the trigger and make that call. There are theories that JP or someone in JP's family forced her to do it, and then somehow was able to escape quickly on the river. Due to the church's worth and the money pouring into the place, people also speculate that local investigation is biased. Even though local investigation did apparently reach out to the FBI to help with an investigation connected to JP and potentially the church, but doesn't necessarily regard Micah. My speculation is that this investigation involves money, assets, and the church being a tax exempt organization. And the fact that Micah's house was conveniently sold to the church by JP at one point to allegedly make sure that she wouldn't have access to that asset upon their divorce. But honestly, I believe this is just the beginning. I'm sure there will be many updates to this case, and I really hope that we get some justice for Micah. My heart breaks for Micah and her family, and I really hope that this entire situation, including Micah's death, is thoroughly investigated and that the family eventually feels that justice is served. No matter the cause of death, Micah was she was pushed to the edge. She is the victim here. No matter how JP tries to change that narrative. She was a kind, caring, and loving person who wanted the best for those around her. She wanted to serve God and support the women in her community. She was trying to get out of a scary and dangerous relationship, and she was taking all the steps she needed to get out of it. And it's such a shame that more couldn't and wasn't done legally to help protect her from her monster of a husband. My heart breaks for her and her family and her friends. And I really hope that this case can open our eyes more to the dangers of blaming everything on mental health. Case can open our eyes because she had a complicated diagnosis that a lot of people, including myself, don't fully understand. She was manipulated, gaslit, threatened, tortured, abused. All of that combined with her diagnosis just makes the life she was living even more challenging and difficult. It is my opinion that if she wasn't facing the marital and personal challenges at the hands of JP, she'd still be here today because she was a fighter. She was a believer, not just in God, but in herself. And she was strong. And I hope that moving forward, we can look to her as a pillar of strength for other women in a DV situation. If you've experienced a situation like this or currently are experiencing one, I've left some resources in the pinned comment down below for you. If you'd like to share any words of encouragement in the comments or share how you perhaps relate to Mica and it's something you want to share, please do so in the comments below. And just let me know overall what you think about the case. What do you think we can do better to support victims and survivors? And what do you think really happened? Let me know down below, and I really appreciate you watching today's video. I hope you have a great rest of your week, and please take care of yourself, ask questions, and stay skeptical. Until then, bye.